I've mentioned before how I feel most spiritual when exposed to the connections of our world and view myself as part of something more than just human society. Being exposed to the raw power of nature certainly triggers that feeling, and today I figured I should immortalize one of those events. Last summer, I did an independent research project for my university collecting and cataloging terrestrial, aquatic, and aquatic mollusks diversity throughout the three properties that our university's nature center has. Basically, I was paid to run around the woods hunting for snails, slugs, and mussels all summer, so pretty much a dream come true. Some days I brought friends, some days I brought my dog Atticus, most days I just went alone. During one of my lone days in midsummer, July 13th to be exact, I decided to trudge through various vernal pools in search of some tiny mollusks and snails. While I did find some of the creatures I set out for, including a bunch of fingernail clams and something called a sharp sprite that I didn't know existed, I also found the remains of a coyote in a backstretch of pool on the land known as the Research Reserve. It was basically only bones by then, but they were intact enough that I could see 3 legs, a number of ribs, some scattered vertebrae, and the top half of the skull. I excitedly took the skull home with me to clean and to keep, and I admired the quick cleanup job that the woods had done on it, and wondered what sort of life the creature had lived. An hour or two later, I found myself knee-deep in another pool, now deep in the woodlot of the Research Reserve. The wind started to pick up in the undeniable whispers of a storm. First a sudden warm breeze rustling the leaves, then an eerie, silent standstill. All the birds fell silent, the insects hid away, and the mollusks rose up from under the logs. They too knew what was coming, and their short time to reign was upon them. I was too far away from my car to make it back in time, so I got out of the vernal pool and stood under a cluster of young birch trees, and I waited. I remember the wind being so sudden and powerful that I was confused at first, but it was quickly replaced with excitement when I realized what was happening. The idea that I was about to be soaked didn't even occur to me at the time. I was just elated to experience a summer storm in the way it was meant to be, under the branches and leaves far away from the nearest road or building. The stillness lasted for only a minute or so before the storm rolled in, and boy did it roll in. It was like a great creature sweeping through the gaps in the trees. First you heard disturbing leaves, then you saw it rushing towards you, and then you felt it right on your skin. The shower was loud and hard, tugging at trees, lifting up leaves, making waves in the nearby pool. I tried moving from tree to tree at first to stay dry, but after a bit I conceded that I was going to be soaked, and I just enjoyed the feeling of the warm water running down my limbs. The storm was amazing, and it enveloped all of my senses like no storm ever had before. The water was warm, the air was alive and smelled sweet and tasted of decaying leaves and new life that was about to spring forward. The trees were moaning, the pool was shaking. I was part of the cycle again. This powerful rain and sweeping wind was just a taste of what nature had to offer, and this storm reminded me of that. Despite all we humans have done to block it out and to conquer it, this earth will outlast all of us. It was truly beautiful. The shower began to subside after 20 minutes or so, and I went on to find snails and slugs over seemingly every tree I passed. The passing of a summer storm was their time to shine after all. I remember later that day, I found a creature I had never seen before that struck on to me like little else had. From 10 or so yards away, I saw what looked like a lone, fallen tulip tree leaf on a branch a foot or so off the ground. Something about it looked a bit off, though. The familiar 4 points of the leaf a bit more rounded and wide, and the yellow strangely muddled with brown splotches uncharacteristic for leaves at that time of summer. I remember walking over to it and audibly gasping to myself when I was close enough. It wasn't a leaf at all, but a large moth clung to the side, upside down to the branch, likely drying off its wings from the storm that had passed through less than an hour before. I got closer and I took a few pictures, smiling from ear to ear at the discovery. Its body was so large and fluffy, and its wings looked perfect and symmetrical and beautiful. I gently scooped it onto my hand, and I remember being shocked at the weight and power of the little creature as it beat its wings a couple of times. It was too wet to fly away, so it kind of fluttered to the ground, but it was still amazing. I remember standing there for at least 10 minutes, looking at the moth as it slowly crawled around my boot in the leaves on the forest floor. I soaked up every wonderful detail of it, From its beautiful pattern to its fuzzy antenna to its adorable little face with water droplets clinging to its fluff around its eyes. Just an absolutely magnificent creature.
What are you eating?
I remember briefly considering taking it with me, but I couldn't bear the thought of cutting its life short. It was midsummer after all, and breeding time for insects, and this creature had given me so much wonder, and had spent its whole life getting to be that beautiful state. Who was I to cut it off? I left the woods that day with more than just a coyote skull. I had the experience of a powerful summer shower as it was meant to be felt. I had the memory of that beautiful moth, striking yellow and astonishing in the fact that something so large and impressive was hiding in plain sight in that of a woodlot. Upon showing a picture of the moth to my Professor Chris later, he too shared my joy. He said it was an imperial moth and remarked that they were relatively common for woods like that, though I had never seen one before, and I treasured the find like it was the first and last creature to ever grace the earth. Upon doing some research later on, I'm pretty sure the one I found was a young male. That probably explains why its wings were so perfect, and it made me even gladder that I didn't take it with me. I loved that moth, and I loved that storm, and I loved those woods, and I still do now. I pray I can experience them all once again in my life, but until then, I'll treasure the memory and what they taught me about the untamed joy of nature, right under our noses.